My name is Eleanor, and at 32 years old, I was about to shatter my family's entire perception of me. When my sister Margaret called frantically about our grandmothers while requiring all family signatures, my carefully constructed double life started crumbling. For 6 years, I'd been building a tech empire worth hundreds of millions while my family believed I was a struggling freelancer barely surviving. Before I reveal how one signature exposed my massive secret and changed everything, where are you watching from? Please hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should believe in you most. Growing up as a Sterling meant living under the weight of massive expectations. Our family name opened doors at country clubs, private schools, and boardrooms across Manhattan. My father, Robert Sterling, had built his reputation as one of Wall Street's most ruthless investment bankers. He'd started at Morgan Stanley straight out of Wharton, and by 40, he was managing portfolios worth billions. Every morning, he'd leave our Upper East Side townhouse at 5:30 sharp, believing that sleeping past dawn was for the weak and unsuccessful. My mother, Patricia, came from old Washington money. Her father had been an ambassador to France, and she'd grown up attending state dinners and charity galas. She met my father at a Yale alumni event and saw in him the perfect combination of ambition and pedigree. Together, they built a life that looked flawless from the outside. The townhouse featured in Architectural Digest, the house in the Hamptons where senators spent their weekends, the perfect family photos that graced our Christmas cards. My older brother Jonathan had inherited both our father's analytical mind and his ruthless ambition. At 36, he was already a vice president at Goldman Sachs, married to Cordelia Ashford, whose family owned half of Martha's Vineyard. They lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, had 2 children enrolled in the city's most exclusive preschool, and spent their weekends at charity auctions where a single painting cost more than most people's annual salaries. My younger sister Margaret had chosen law like our grandfather, graduating from Columbia Law with honors. At 29, she was a senior associate at Cravath, engaged to Theodore Huntington, whose father was a senator and whose mother was a federal judge. Margaret collected designer handbags like trophies and could recite the net worth of every family in their social circle. Then there was me, Eleanor, the middle child who'd somehow gone completely wrong. I'd loved computers since I was 8, when I'd taken apart our family desktop to see how it worked. While my siblings were at tennis lessons and cotillion classes, I was teaching myself to code in my bedroom. My parents tolerated this phase until I announced I was majoring in computer science at MIT instead of economics at an Ivy League school. Computer science? My mother had said, her voice dripping with disdain. That's for people who can't handle real business degrees. But I persisted, graduating with honors and landing a job at a small healthcare startup in Brooklyn. To my family, I might as well have announced I was joining the circus. The breaking point came 6 years ago, at Thanksgiving. I'd been working at the startup for 2 years, making $40,000 annually, which in New York meant sharing an apartment with 3 roommates and eating ramen more often than I'd like to admit. But I loved the work. We were building software that could help doctors save lives, and that meant everything to me. I arrived at my parents' townhouse that November evening, knowing something was different. Usually, our family gatherings were carefully choreographed performances where we all played our parts. But that night, there was a tension in the air, like the moment before a hostile takeover. After dinner, my father called me into his study. The rest of the family followed, arranging themselves around the room like a corporate board about to fire an underperforming CEO. Eleanor, my father began, not bothering with pleasantries, we need to discuss your situation. My situation? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. You're 26 years old, he continued, living in squalor in Brooklyn, working at some startup that will probably fail within the year. Your siblings have built real careers, real lives. What do you have to show for yourself? Jonathan leaned forward from his perch on the leather sofa. Eleanor, I could get you a position as my secretary. It's not ideal, but at least it would be respectable employment. You'd make twice what you're making now. I don't want to be your secretary, I said quietly. I'm a software engineer. Margaret laughed, a cruel sound that reminded me of every time she'd mocked me growing up. A software engineer? Eleanor, you fix computers. That's like calling a janitor a sanitation engineer. That's enough, my mother interjected, but not to defend me. Eleanor, we've been patient with your experimentation, but it's time to grow up. Either you accept Jonathan's offer, or find similar respectable employment, or we'll have to reconsider your position in this family. My position? I felt my hands trembling. The family trust, my father explained coldly. Your grandmother set aside funds for each grandchild, but there are behavioral clauses. As executor, I have discretion over distributions. I won't support continued failure. I'm not a failure, I protested. I'm building something important. You're building nothing, my mother said, her voice sharp as crystal. You're an embarrassment, Eleanor. Do you know what I tell people when they ask about you? I changed the subject. Because how can I explain that my daughter, with all her advantages, all her education, chooses to live like some common programmer? The word common hit me like a physical blow. In my mother's world, there was no greater sin than being ordinary. We're giving you 6 months, my father concluded. Get a real job, or you're on your own. No trust fund, no family support, no inheritance. You'll be erased from this family's future. I looked around the room at their faces. My father's cold determination. My mother's practiced disappointment. Jonathan's condescending pity. Margaret's barely concealed glee at my humiliation. I understand, I said finally. Good, my father nodded. Jonathan will send you some positions to apply for. I stood to leave, but my mother's voice stopped me at the door. Eleanor, she said, we're doing this because we love you. Someday, you'll thank us for forcing you to live up to your potential. I drove back to Brooklyn that night in my ancient Honda Civic, tears streaming down my face. But by the time I reached my apartment, the tears had dried, replaced by something harder and more determined. They wanted me to live up to my potential? Fine. I would. But I'd do it on my own terms, and they'd never see it coming. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity. I looked around my shared apartment, at the air mattress I slept on, at the milk crates that served as my bookshelf, at the laptop held together with duct tape. This wasn't failure. This was the beginning. I opened my laptop and started planning. I would build something they could never imagine. Something that would dwarf their traditional success. And I would do it completely in secret. The first step was simple. Disappear from their radar while appearing to struggle. The second step was harder. Build an empire without them knowing. I had 6 months to make them believe I was trying and failing to meet their expectations. After that, I'd be free to build without their scrutiny. It was perfect. They'd write me off as the family failure, and I'd use their dismissal as cover for what I was really doing. That morning, I made myself a promise. One day, they'd learn the truth. And when they did, I'd finally be free from seeking their approval because I'd have something more valuable. Proof that their vision of success was as limited as their vision of me. The first 3 months after that Thanksgiving were carefully orchestrated theater. I applied to the positions Jonathan sent, intentionally bombing interviews with corporate firms that would report back to my family. I'd show up in my thrift store suit, give technically correct but uninspiring answers, and watch as interviewers mentally crossed me off their lists. Each rejection letter was forwarded to my father as proof I was trying. Meanwhile, my real work happened between midnight and dawn. After my roommates went to sleep, I'd sit at our kitchen table with my laptop, teaching myself machine learning and artificial intelligence. The startup I worked for during the day gave me invaluable insight into healthcare's massive inefficiencies. Doctors spent 60% of their time on paperwork. Patient data was scattered across dozens of incompatible systems. Medical errors due to information gaps killed thousands annually. The solution came to me during a particularly brutal shift helping our lead developer debug code. What if we could create an AI assistant that integrated all these disparate systems? Something that could read handwritten notes, parse test results, cross-reference symptoms with medical databases, and present doctors with comprehensive patient histories in seconds? I started building a prototype in my spare time, which meant I had no spare time. I'd work my day job from 9 to 6, come home and code until 3 in the morning, sleep for 4 hours, then do it again. Weekends didn't exist. Social life was a memory. I canceled my gym membership and ran in the park at dawn to save $30 a month. My diet consisted of rice, beans, and whatever vegetables were on sale. My roommates thought I was depressed. My few remaining friends stopped inviting me places after I declined too many times. But I didn't care. Every line of code brought me closer to something revolutionary. The breakthrough came when I met David Park at a hackathon in Queens. I'd entered hoping to win the $1,000 prize to pay for server costs. David was a young doctor from Mount Sinai, frustrated with hospital technology that seemed designed to waste time rather than save lives. I spent 4 hours yesterday trying to find one patient's previous lab results, he complained during a coffee break. 4 hours that I could have spent actually treating patients. I showed him my prototype, a rough version of the AI assistant I'd been building. His eyes widened as he watched it parse medical records and identify patterns in seconds. "This is incredible," he breathed. "Do you have any idea how many lives this could save? Want to help me build it properly?" I asked. That night, MedFlow Solutions was born. David brought medical expertise and connections in the healthcare world. I brought the technical architecture and development skills. We shook hands over cold pizza at 2 in the morning, neither of us realizing we'd just started a company that would revolutionize healthcare. The next few months were brutal. David and I worked out of my apartment, much to my roommate's annoyance. We'd spread medical textbooks across the living room floor, whiteboards covered every wall, and the Wi-Fi constantly crashed from the strain of our development servers. Our first prototype failed spectacularly during a demo at a small clinic in Brooklyn. The system crashed, taking the clinic's entire network down with it. The office manager threatened to sue us, and we spent 18 hours straight fixing their systems for free. "Maybe your family was right," David said during a particularly dark moment, both of us exhausted and running on coffee fumes. "Maybe this is impossible." "No," I said firmly. "We just need to rebuild it better." The second version was more stable but still flawed. Doctors found the interface confusing. The AI made recommendations that were technically correct but clinically impractical. We spent weeks in hospital cafeterias, buying coffee for residents and picking their brains about workflow. By version 3, we had something promising. The interface was intuitive. The AI had been trained on thousands of real cases. The system integrated with major electronic health records. But we had a new problem: money. My savings were gone. David had maxed out his credit cards. We needed funding, but my name couldn't be attached to anything. My family had connections throughout the venture capital world, and one Google search would blow my cover. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. I incorporated MedFlow Solutions with David as CEO and public face. I was listed as Rose Chen, using my middle name and a fake surname. All official documents used this identity. I created an elaborate backstory. Rose was a reclusive technical genius who preferred to work behind the scenes. David would handle all in-person meetings while I dialed in by voice only, claiming camera shyness. We pitched to 47 investors. 47 rejections. 2 ambitious. 2 unproven. 2 risky. Number 48 changed everything. Sarah Martinez ran a small healthcare-focused venture fund. She'd been a doctor before becoming an investor and immediately understood our vision. After grilling David for 2 hours and reviewing our technical documentation, she made an offer: $500,000 for 20% equity. "One condition," she said. "I want to meet your mysterious co-founder." My heart stopped. David started to make excuses, but Sarah held up her hand. "I don't need to see her face," she said. "But I need to hear her vision directly. Voice call is fine." That night, I pitched my heart out over a crackling Skype connection. I talked about doctors burning out from paperwork, about patients dying from preventable medical errors, about AI that could give every doctor superhuman memory and pattern recognition. When I finished, there was silence. "When can you start scaling?" Sarah asked. We signed the papers the next week. I signed as Rose Chen, my hand shaking only slightly as I created this alternate identity on legal documents. With funding secured, everything accelerated. We hired 2 developers who worked remotely and never questioned why their CEO's co-founder never appeared on video calls. We moved out of my apartment into a small office in Queens, though I only went there at night when no one else was around. Our first paying customer was that same Brooklyn clinic where our prototype had crashed. The office manager who'd threatened to sue became our biggest champion when she saw how the new system cut their paperwork time by 70%. Word spread through the medical community. By month 6, we had 12 clinics using MedFlow. Revenue hit $10,000 monthly. Then 20. Then 50. I still lived like I was broke. Same apartment, same ramen diet, same thrift store clothes. Every penny went back into the business. My family, checking in occasionally, saw exactly what they expected: a failure barely scraping by. At Christmas dinner that year, my mother surveyed my outfit with barely concealed disgust. "Eleanor, surely you can afford something newer?" she suggested. "I'm doing my best," I replied, letting my shoulders slump in practiced defeat. "Well," my father interjected, "keep trying. Though at this point, perhaps you should consider alternatives. Graduate school, perhaps. We could possibly help with that." "I'll think about it," I lied, knowing that by next Christmas, everything would be different. Year 2 of MedFlow Solutions began with a decision that would define everything that followed. David and I sat in our Queens office at midnight, surrounded by empty coffee cups and revenue projections that seemed impossible. "We need to scale faster," David said, rubbing his exhausted eyes. 12 clinics isn't enough. The technology works. We need to get it into hospitals. He was right. Hospital systems were where the real impact lay. But hospitals meant bigger contracts, more scrutiny, and a much higher risk of my identity being exposed. We needed a strategy that would let us grow while keeping me invisible. The solution came from an unexpected source: international markets. European hospitals were more open to AI innovation and, crucially, less likely to overlap with my family's social circles. We started with a hospital in Amsterdam, then Berlin, then Stockholm. The physical distance provided perfect cover. I became a master of deception. Every interaction was carefully orchestrated. When we needed to sign contracts, I used electronic signatures as Rose Chen. For video calls with international clients, I claimed unreliable internet and stayed audio only. David became the face of the company, while I remained the mysterious technical genius behind the scenes. Our first major breakthrough came when Amsterdam General Hospital reported a 40% reduction in diagnostic errors after implementing our system. The medical journal article they published didn't mention company names, but word spread through professional networks. Suddenly, hospitals were calling us. By year 3, we had expanded to 50 employees, all working remotely except for a core team in the Queen's office. I interviewed candidates through voice calls, built our technical architecture at night, and reviewed code, while my family thought I was struggling with freelance projects. The double life was exhausting but necessary. Family dinners became performances where I played the struggling disappointment. I'd mention small freelance victories to avoid suspicion, careful to keep them modest enough to maintain my failure narrative. "I got a new client," I announced at Easter dinner, picking at my food. "A small business website. Nothing fancy, but it'll help with rent." "That's nice," my mother replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "Jonathan just closed a deal worth $50 million. Perhaps he could give you some career advice." "Maybe," I murmured, knowing Jonathan's advice would be worthless for building an AI empire. Meanwhile, MedFlow's growth was exponential. We raised our series of funding. $20 million from a consortium of international investors. The valuation put us at $100 million. My 51% stake was worth $51 million on paper, but I couldn't touch it without revealing everything. Managing money became its own challenge. I set up a complex structure of offshore accounts and holding companies, all technically legal, but designed for maximum privacy. My salary from MedFlow went to accounts under Rose Chen, then through several transfers before reaching accounts I could access. I paid taxes scrupulously, knowing that financial crimes would destroy everything. The closest I came to being discovered was at a medical technology conference in Boston. I'd attended secretly, wearing a wig and glasses, wanting to see our competition firsthand. During a coffee break, I literally bumped into Harrison Walsh, my family's estate lawyer. "Excuse me," I mumbled, keeping my head down. "No problem," he replied, then paused. "Do I know you? You look familiar." "I just have one of those faces," I said, affecting a slight accent and hurrying away. My heart pounded for hours afterward. David noticed the strain. "You can't keep this up forever," he said one evening as we reviewed expansion plans. "Why not just tell them?" "You don't understand," I replied. "It's not about the money or the success anymore. It's about proving something." They wrote me off. They decided I was nothing. When I reveal this, it needs to be undeniable, overwhelming. It needs to be so big they can never dismiss me again. By year 4, MedFlow had become impossible to ignore in healthcare circles. We were processing millions of patient records daily. Our AI had helped diagnose rare conditions that human doctors had missed. We'd saved lives, reduced costs, and transformed how hospitals operated. The media started calling us the healthcare unicorn, though they could never get a clear photo of the mysterious Rose Chen. I became a legend in tech circles, the founder who built a $100 million company without ever showing her face. Forbes wanted to profile us. TechCrunch begged for interviews. 60 Minutes offered a primetime segment. David handled them all, explaining that his co-founder valued privacy above publicity. It became part of our mystique. In an age of social media CEOs, Rose Chen's invisibility made her fascinating. Year 5 brought a new challenge: government contracts. The Department of Veterans Affairs wanted to implement our system across VA hospitals. The contract was worth $200 million, but it required security clearances and background checks that would expose my real identity. We spent months working with lawyers to structure the deal. Eventually, we created a subsidiary with David as sole executive, allowing him to handle all government interactions. I remained in the shadows, architecting the technology that would help millions of veterans receive better care. Personal relationships suffered most. I'd started dating Michael, a graphic designer who understood creative passion. But how could I explain why I was never available weekends? Why I couldn't introduce him to my family? Why I sometimes disappeared for days to handle company crises? "I feel like you're living a double life," he said during what would be our final conversation. "Like there's this whole part of you I'll never know." He was right. I couldn't share my truth without risking everything. We parted ways, another sacrifice on the altar of my secret success. My grandmother Dorothy was the only family member who seemed to sense something. At family gatherings, she'd watch me with knowing eyes, occasionally making cryptic comments. "Still waters run deep," she'd say, patting my hand. "Some of us are late bloomers, Eleanor. And some of us bloom in private gardens." I wondered sometimes if she knew, if perhaps she'd hired someone to investigate her grandchildren and discovered my secret. But she never said anything explicit, just smiled and treated me with a kindness the rest of the family had forgotten. By the end of year 5, MedFlow Solutions was valued at $300 million. We had 300 employees across 12 countries. Our technology had processed over 50 million patient records and helped diagnose conditions that would have been missed otherwise. I still lived in the same apartment, though now I own the entire building under a shell company. I still wore thrift store clothes to family events, though I had a closet full of designer suits for the rare times I needed to appear somewhere as Rose. I still played the failure at family dinners, though I ran board meetings that determined the future of healthcare technology. The strain was immense. I'd built something incredible, but I couldn't share it with anyone who mattered. Success felt hollow when celebrated alone. Sometimes I stood on my apartment roof at night, looking at the city lights, and wondered if the revenge was worth the isolation. But then I'd remember my mother's words, "You're an embarrassment." My father's dismissal, "You've built nothing." My siblings' condescension. And I'd return to my laptop, ready to build even more. Maintaining my cover story became an elaborate performance art. Every family gathering required careful preparation. I'd practice my defeated posture in the mirror, rehearse stories about failed projects and difficult clients, even mess up my hair and wear deliberately unflattering clothes to complete the image of struggle. Holidays were the worst. While running a company worth hundreds of millions, I'd sit at my parents' table listening to updates about everyone else's achievements. Victoria just made partner, my mother announced at Thanksgiving, beaming at my sister. The youngest woman ever at her firm. "We're so proud." "That's wonderful," I said genuinely, though the irony wasn't lost on me. Victoria had made partner at a mid-sized firm. I'd built a company that employed more lawyers than her entire office. "And Marcus's startup just got featured in the Wall Street Journal," my father added, nodding approvingly at my brother. "Revolutionary fintech, they called it." I'd read the article. Marcus's startup was a basic payment processing app that would fail within 18 months. But I smiled and congratulated him while mentally reviewing MedFlow's latest algorithm improvements. "What about you, Eleanor?" Aunt Jennifer asked, her tone sympathetic in a way that made my skin crawl. "Any exciting news?" "I'm working on a few projects," I replied vaguely. "Freelance stuff." "It's been steady." "Steady," my mother repeated, making the words sound like failure. "Well, at least you're trying." The condescension was suffocating. They discussed my life like I wasn't there, making suggestions about career coaches and coding boot camps, completely unaware they were advising someone who'd written algorithms that saved lives daily. Christmas was particularly brutal that year. My family had a tradition of sharing their yearly accomplishments over dinner. As we went around the table, each person's success seemed designed to highlight my supposed failure. Jonathan had been promoted to managing director, making him one of the youngest in Goldman's history. Margaret had won a high-profile case that set legal precedent. My mother had raised $2 million for her charity gala. My father had been featured on the cover of Financial Times. When my turn came, I mentioned landing a contract to redesign a local restaurant's website. The pitying looks around the table were almost comical. "Well," my grandmother Dorothy said, breaking the awkward silence, "we all bloom at different speeds. Some flowers take longer to show their true colors." She winked at me, and I wondered again how much she knew. The closest call came at my mother's birthday party. She'd rented out the Rainbow Room for 200 of her closest friends. I'd worn my usual thrift store dress, but standing among New York's elite, I felt like I was wearing a costume. During cocktail hour, I overheard two venture capitalists discussing MedFlow. "Rose Chun is brilliant," one said. "I've been trying to get a meeting for months. Their Series B is going to be massive." "I heard she never does in-person meetings," the other replied. "Some say she doesn't actually exist. That it's all an elaborate marketing scheme." I almost choked on my champagne. They were standing 3 feet away from Rose Chun, dismissing her existence while she pretended to be a failure at her mother's party. "Eleanor." My mother's voice cut through my eavesdropping. "Come here. I want you to meet someone." She dragged me over to a woman in her 50s wearing diamonds that could fund a small startup. "This is Mrs. Pemberton," my mother said. "Her daughter runs a small marketing firm. I thought perhaps she might have some work for you." "Simple things. Social media posts, perhaps." The humiliation burned, but I smiled politely. "That's very kind. I'll send her my portfolio." "Don't oversell yourself, dear," my mother whispered as Mrs. Pemberton walked away. "We don't want to disappoint people with unrealistic expectations." I escaped to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall and taking deep breaths. In my phone were emails from hospital CEOs begging for meetings with Rose Chun. But here, I was being offered pity work doing social media for someone's daughter. The personal cost grew heavier each month. Friends from college had stopped reaching out, tired of my excuses for missing gatherings. Dating was impossible when I couldn't explain my erratic schedule or why I sometimes needed to fly to Europe on 12 hours' notice. I tried therapy, but how could I be honest? I'm secretly worth millions, but pretending to be poor to spite my family sounded like delusion. Instead, I talked around the edges about family pressure and work stress, never revealing the full truth. My health suffered. Stress manifested in migraines, insomnia, and a constant knot in my stomach. I'd lost weight from forgetting to eat during 18-hour coding sessions. Dark circles under my eyes became permanent fixtures. "You look terrible," Margaret said at Easter brunch, her voice mixing concern with satisfaction. "Are you eating properly? I know money must be tight." "I'm fine," I insisted, though I'd been awake for 36 hours dealing with a server crisis that could have cost us millions. "Maybe you should move back home," my father suggested. "Just temporarily. Until you get on your feet. We could convert the guest room." The offer was so patronizing, I almost laughed. Move back home while I was negotiating contracts worth more than our family townhouse. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm managing." "Barely," Jonathan muttered, not quite under his breath. The irony reached peak absurdity when my father gave a speech at his birthday about success and legacy. "What matters," he said, raising his glass, "is building something that lasts, creating value, leaving a mark on the world." He looked at each of his children, his gaze lingering disapprovingly on me. "Some understand this. Others, well, we can only hope they'll learn." I raised my glass with everyone else, toasting to building something lasting while my company's algorithms processed millions of medical decisions globally. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen. An email from the Wall Street Journal sat in my inbox, another interview request for the elusive Rose Chin. Next to it was a text from my mother, "Saw a job posting for junior web developer. Shall I send?" The disconnect between my two lives had become a chasm. In one world, I was Eleanor Sterling, family disappointment, and struggling freelancer. In the other, I was Rose Chin, mysterious tech genius revolutionizing healthcare. But as I deleted my mother's text and responded to the journal with another polite decline, I realized the performance couldn't last forever. The weight of the secret was crushing me. Each family gathering left deeper scars. Each lie compounded the isolation. My grandmother's health had been declining. At her last doctor's appointment, she'd pulled me aside privately. "Whatever you're hiding," she said quietly, "whatever you're building in secret, don't wait too long to reveal it. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves, and it's better to control the narrative than be controlled by it." I stared at her, speechless. She patted my cheek gently. "I've lived long enough to recognize ambition hiding behind humility." "Your armor is impressive, dear one, but even the strongest armor eventually cracks." As I left her apartment that day, I wondered if she was right. If maybe the cost of revenge had become higher than the satisfaction it might bring. But I'd come too far to stop now. The performance would continue until something forced my hand. I had no idea that something would come sooner than expected. Year 6 began with MedFlow Solutions reaching an inflection point. We weren't just a promising startup anymore. We were fundamentally changing how healthcare operated globally. Our AI processed over 10 million patient interactions daily, caught thousands of potential medical errors, and had become essential infrastructure for hospitals across 15 countries. The Series B funding round attracted attention from every major venture fund in Silicon Valley. They all wanted to meet the mysterious Rose Chin. David had become a master at deflecting, explaining my eccentric preference for privacy, while showcasing our technology's undeniable results. "Your co-founder is either a genius or a ghost," one investor joked after committing $30 million to our round. "Maybe both." If only they knew she was sitting in a Brooklyn apartment, code reviewing while her family thought she was desperately seeking freelance work. We raised $90 million at a valuation of $800 million. My stake was now worth over $400 million on paper. The numbers felt surreal, especially when contrasted with my mother's latest suggestion that I consider becoming a receptionist for stable income. Managing a hidden empire required incredible logistics. I'd created an entire shadow infrastructure to maintain my anonymity, A team of lawyers in Switzerland handled my corporate structures. Accountants in Singapore managed the complex financial flows. Everything was legal but labyrinthine, designed to protect my identity while allowing me to maintain control. Board meetings were elaborate productions. I'd dial in from a secure line, voice modulated slightly to prevent recording analysis. When documents needed signing, they'd be sent to a private courier service that would deliver them to random locations I'd specify. I became an expert at digital signatures and encrypted communications. The hardest part was hiding my travel. When critical situations arose in our European offices, I'd create elaborate cover stories. A freelance client in Boston would mysteriously require me to be gone for a week, during which I'd actually be in Berlin managing a crisis or Stockholm signing partnerships. "You're so dedicated to your little projects," Victoria commented at a family lunch, condescension dripping from every word. Flying to Boston for a small website job. It's almost admirable. If she knew I'd actually been signing a $50 million contract with the Swedish health ministry, she might have choked on her salad. The technology kept evolving. We'd moved beyond simple diagnostic assistance to predictive healthcare. Our AI could analyze patterns across millions of patients and predict health crises before symptoms appeared. We were literally saving lives daily, preventing heart attacks, catching cancers early, identifying rare diseases that would have gone undiagnosed. Medical journals published papers about our impact. The New England Journal of Medicine called our system the most significant advance in diagnostic medicine since the MRI. The Lancet featured a study showing 30% reduction in diagnostic errors in hospitals using our platform. I'd print these articles and keep them hidden in my apartment, tangible proof of what I'd built while my family believed I was worthless. The government contracts expanded beyond the VA. The NHS in Britain wanted our system. Health Canada was interested. Even China, typically resistant to foreign medical technology, began negotiations. Each contract required careful structuring to hide my identity while ensuring I maintained control. Competition emerged, but we stayed ahead through relentless innovation. While competitors focused on narrow applications, we built comprehensive solutions. Our moat wasn't just technology. It was the vast network of integrated systems and the trust we'd earned from thousands of healthcare providers. The media fascination with Rose Chun intensified. Business Insider ran a feature titled "The Ghost in the Machine," healthcare's most mysterious founder. Forbes included me on their 30 under 30 list, with a black silhouette where my photo should be. The mystique had become part of our brand. I heard a rumor, David told me one evening, that Rose Chun is actually an AI. That you don't exist at all, that you're just our most advanced algorithm pretending to be human. We laughed, but the irony wasn't lost on me. I'd become so hidden that people questioned my existence, while I sat at family dinners being pitted for my very real presence. The empire grew beyond healthcare. We acquired 3 smaller companies, integrating their technologies into our platform. We launched a research division focused on using AI for drug discovery. We partnered with medical schools to train the next generation of doctors on AI-assisted diagnosis. Employee number 500 was hired on a Tuesday afternoon while my mother texted asking if I needed money for groceries. The contrast had become absurd. Managing hundreds of employees while remaining invisible required innovative approaches. I held virtual town halls, voice only, where I shared vision and strategy. I created detailed written communications, becoming known for comprehensive strategic documents that guided company direction. My leadership style evolved to work within my constraints. The employees created their own mythology around Rose Chun. Some believed I was disfigured and hiding physical scars. Others thought I was a former intelligence operative maintaining cover. The most creative theory involved me being multiple people sharing one identity. Whatever the truth, one senior engineer said in an interview, Rose is the most brilliant technical mind I've encountered. The code architecture is elegant beyond belief. Reading those words in TechCrunch while my brother explained basic coding to me at Thanksgiving was a surreal experience. You know, Eleanor, Jonathan said patronizingly, coding is really about logic. Maybe if you approached it more systematically, you'd have better success. I nodded along while mentally reviewing the patent application for our latest algorithm, which would revolutionize early cancer detection. The pressure to go public mounted. Investment bankers circled constantly, promising billion-dollar valuations. The board pushed for transparency, arguing that revealing Rose Chun would boost our IPO prospects. But I wasn't ready. The reveal had to happen on my terms. My grandmother's health deteriorated rapidly. Doctor visits became hospital stays. The family gathered more frequently, discussions turning to inheritance and legacy. She built substantial wealth through careful investing, leaving an estate worth approximately $10 million. During one visit, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Eleanor," she whispered, "promise me something. Whatever you're hiding, whatever secret you're keeping, don't let it die with you. Truth has a way of honoring those who speak it." "I promise, Grandma," I said, tears in my eyes. She smiled. "Good. And Eleanor, I'm proud of you. More than you know." Those were among her last coherent words to me. The empire I'd built felt hollow without her knowing the full truth. She'd been the only family member who'd seen potential in me when everyone else saw failure. Her death would bring the family together for estate settlements, and I sensed that gathering would change everything. As year 6 ended, MedFlow Solutions was valued at over $1 billion. We had 800 employees across 20 countries. Our technology had processed over 100 million patient interactions and saved countless lives. But I still sat at family dinners, playing the failure, watching my parents' disappointment deepen with each passing year. The secret had become a prison of my own making, golden bars built from hidden success. The question was no longer whether to reveal the truth, but when and how. The answer would come sooner than I expected, forced by circumstances beyond my control. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of reviewing contracts for our Japanese expansion when my phone rang. Margaret's name on the screen made my stomach clench. She only called when absolutely necessary. "Eleanor, you need to come home," she said without preamble. "Grandmother passed away last night." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd known it was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. Dorothy Sterling had been my only ally in a family that saw me as a disappointment. "I'll catch the next train," I managed. "There's more," Margaret continued, her lawyer voice taking over. "Her will has some unusual provisions. We need all direct heirs present for the reading and estate settlement. Harrison Walsh says it's non-negotiable." Harrison Walsh, the same estate lawyer I'd nearly run into at the Boston conference. My mind raced through implications. "When?" "Friday. 2 o'clock. His office." "And Eleanor?" She paused. "Try to dress appropriately. This is serious." The condescension in her voice made my jaw clench. If only she knew I'd be leaving a board meeting worth millions to attend. I spent the next 3 days in crisis mode. My legal team worked frantically to understand what unusual provisions might mean. The pessimistic scenario was that grandmother had somehow discovered my secret and built protections into her will. The optimistic one was standard estate complexity. Neither proved correct. Friday arrived gray and drizzling, pathetic fallacy at its finest. I dressed carefully in my struggling freelancer costume, a 5-year-old black dress from Target, scuffed flats, minimal makeup. The designer suit I'd worn to that morning's virtual investor call hung in my office, a reminder of my double life. Harrison Walsh's office occupied the top floor of a Manhattan high-rise, all marble and mahogany designed to whisper old money. The family had already gathered in the conference room when I arrived. My father sat at the head of the table, gray suit impeccable, reading something on his phone. Mother perched beside him, diamonds glittering despite the somber occasion. Jonathan and Margaret flanked them, both in lawyer mode, while their spouses occupied chairs along the wall. Eleanor," my mother said, eyes scanning my outfit with familiar disappointment. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd make it. The subway was delayed." I lied, having actually spent 20 minutes in the building's bathroom psyching myself up. Harrison Walsh entered precisely at 2, followed by two associates carrying boxes of documents. He was older than I remembered from our near encounter, silver-haired and sharp-eyed behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Thank you all for coming," he began, arranging papers with practiced efficiency. "As you know, Dorothy Sterling's estate is substantial and complex. She's left detailed instructions for distribution." He pulled out a thick document. "The total estate value is approximately $12 million, including properties, investments, and personal effects." Mother shifted forward slightly. Even wealthy families paid attention when millions were discussed. However, Walsh continued, "Mrs. Sterling included several unusual provisions. First, all beneficiaries must be present for distribution. Second, and more significantly, she requires full financial disclosure from each heir." The room went still. "Financial disclosure?" my father asked, his lawyer instincts activating. "Complete disclosure," Walsh confirmed. "Current assets, liabilities, business interests, and notably, any company ownership stakes." She was very specific about this requirement. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The trap I'd walked into. Why would she require that? Jonathan demanded. Walsh adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Sterling believed in what she called proportional inheritance. She wanted to ensure her wealth went where it would do the most good. Those with greater existing assets receive smaller portions, allowing those with less to benefit more substantially. "That's ridiculous," Margaret protested. "Punishing success?" Her words were, "balancing scales," Walsh replied calmly. She also specified that any false disclosure would result in complete disinheritance and potential legal action for fraud. The room erupted in discussion. My family, so used to controlling narratives, faced a situation where truth was mandatory. I sat silently, mind racing through options. "This is manageable," my father declared, regaining composure. "We'll simply provide the required documentation. Our finances are transparent." "Excellent," Walsh said. "I'll need certified statements from each of you within the hour. My associates have prepared the necessary forms." The next 30 minutes were orchestrated chaos. Family members called accountants, retrieved documents, printed statements. I sat at the conference table, staring at the disclosure form that would end my charade. One by one, they submitted their documents. Jonathan's net worth, $8 million, mostly Goldman Sachs stock. Margaret, $3 million in savings and property. My parents, combined assets of $60 million, accumulated over decades of careful investing. Then Walsh turned to me. "Miss Sterling, your disclosure." Every eye in the room focused on me. I saw my mother's embarrassed expectation, my father's impatience, my siblings' condescension. They expected a pitiful number, maybe 50,000 in savings if I'd been frugal. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted folder containing documents I'd hoped never to share with them. "I need to explain something first," I began, voice steadier than I felt. "Eleanor, just give him the forms," my father said dismissively. "We don't need a speech about your financial struggles." "I'm not struggling," I said quietly. The room went silent. "What do you mean?" my mother asked. I handed Walsh the folder. "My full disclosure, as requested. You'll find everything properly documented and verified." He opened it, professional composure cracking as he scanned the first page. His eyes widened, met mine, then returned to the documents. This is accurate?" he asked. "Completely." "What's going on?" Jonathan demanded. "What's in there?" Walsh cleared his throat. "According to these documents, Eleanor Sterling is the majority owner of MedFlow Solutions, holding 51% of shares currently valued at approximately." He paused, double-checking the number. $512 million. The silence was absolute. You could have heard dust settling. "Additionally," Walsh continued, voice slightly shaky, "she has liquid assets of $40 million, real estate holdings worth $15 million, and various other investments totaling approximately $20 million. Total net worth, $587 million. My mother fainted. Actually fainted, sliding from her chair in a designer heap. My father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. Jonathan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Margaret grabbed her phone, presumably to Google MedFlow Solutions. That's impossible, my father finally managed. MedFlow, that's E. Rose Chen's company. Everyone knows that. I am E. Rose Chen, I said simply. Rose is my middle name. Chen was randomly selected. I've been building MedFlow for 6 years while you thought I was failing. No, Jonathan said, shaking his head. No, this is some kind of mistake. Eleanor can barely build a website. She can't have built this as fraud. It has to be. Walsh intervened. I can assure you, all documentation has been verified. Bank statements, incorporation documents, board resolutions. It's all legitimate. Margaret's phone shook in her hands. Oh my God. MedFlow just announced a partnership with the WHO. Their technology. Eleanor, did you really build this? Every line of code in the core system, I confirmed. Every algorithm. Every patent. My mother had recovered enough to sit up, though she remained on the floor. Why? She whispered. Why didn't you tell us? The question I dreaded and anticipated for years. The room waited for my answer. Tell you what? I asked, 6 years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. That I was succeeding despite your complete lack of faith? That I was building something revolutionary while you pitted me at every family gathering? That I was worth hundreds of millions while you offered me grocery money? We were trying to help. My father protested. No, I said firmly. You were trying to control. You gave me an ultimatum 6 years ago. Conform to your definition of success or be erased from the family. I chose a third option. I succeeded beyond your wildest dreams while letting you believe I failed. But the lying, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. All these years of deception. I learned from the best, I replied. You've been lying about me at every social gathering for years. Poor Eleanor. We don't know what went wrong. We gave her every advantage. Well, here's the truth. I didn't need your advantages. I needed you to believe in me, just once. When that didn't happen, I did it myself. The conference room erupted into chaos. Harrison Walsh attempted to restore order, while my family processed the impossible truth. My father, the man who'd built his identity on being the family's primary success story, struggled to comprehend that his failure, daughter, had out-earned him by a factor of 10. Show me proof, he demanded, reverting to lawyer mode. Anyone can forge documents. Walsh pulled up MedFlow's corporate registry on his laptop, displaying the ownership structure. There it was, E. Rose Chen, 51% owner, with my encrypted signature on every document. This is really you? Margaret asked, staring at her phone. E. Rose Chen, that fortune called, healthcare's most innovative mind. The very same, I confirmed. Jonathan finally found his voice. But how? You were living in that terrible apartment, wearing? He gestured at my outfit. This. Eating ramen. We saw you struggling. You saw what you expected to see. I corrected. What you wanted to see. It confirmed your worldview, that I was less than you. Meanwhile, I was building algorithms that save lives daily. The Boston trips, Victoria suddenly said. You weren't freelancing. You were. Running board meetings. Signing partnerships. Building an empire. I pulled out my phone and showed them my actual calendar. Last week's freelance project was actually finalizing a $100 million contract with the Japanese health ministry. My mother stood shakily, attempting to process. But we offered to help you so many times. Jonathan offered you a job. We offered money. You offered pity, I said. You offered to make me small enough to fit into your world. I needed to build my own. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Their carefully ordered world, where success followed predictable paths through law firms and investment banks, had been shattered by the daughter they'd written off. Walsh cleared his throat. Perhaps we should return to the matter of the estate? Right, my father said mechanically. The proportional inheritance. Indeed, Walsh nodded. Given the disclosed assets, the distribution would be as follows. Eleanor, having the highest net worth, would receive Mrs. Sterling's personal effects and a symbolic $1. The remaining $12 million would be divided among the other heirs proportionally. That hardly seems fair, Margaret protested, then caught herself. I mean, given what we now know. It's perfectly fair, I interrupted. Grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. Walsh smiled slightly. Actually, there's more. Mrs. Sterling left a sealed letter for Eleanor to be opened only after full disclosure was made. He handed me an envelope with my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Eleanor, I read aloud. If you're reading this, then you've finally told them the truth. Yes, I knew. I've known for 3 years. A grandmother has her ways, and I was too proud of you to remain ignorant. I watched you suffer through family dinners, enduring their condescension with grace I could never have managed. I saw the toll the secret took on you, but I also understood why you kept it. They needed to learn that success comes in forms they couldn't imagine. The disclosure requirement wasn't about money. It was about forcing truth into the light. You've carried this burden long enough. Whatever happens next, know that I saw you, the real you, and I couldn't be prouder. I leave you the only thing you truly need from me, my complete collection of first edition medical texts. May they remind you that healing comes in many forms, and you've chosen the noblest one. All my love, Grandmother Dorothy, P.S. Your code is elegant. Yes, I learned enough Python to understand. Never underestimate a Sterling woman. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. Even in death, she'd found a way to validate what no one else had seen. She knew, my father asked weakly. She knew, I confirmed. And unlike the rest of you, she chose to trust me rather than judge me. The aftermath unfolded in stages. First came denial, my family convincing themselves this was an elaborate prank. Then anger, accusations of deception and manipulation flying across the conference table. Bargaining followed, with sudden offers of partnership and collaboration. We could merge your technology with my connections, Jonathan suggested desperately. Think of the synergies. I have all the connections I need, I replied. Built on merit, not nepotism. Depression set in as they realized what they'd missed. 6 years of my life, my greatest achievements, had happened without their knowledge or support. They'd been excluded from my success as thoroughly as they'd excluded me from their definition of it. Finally, a tentative acceptance emerged. What happens now? My mother asked quietly.
Now.
I considered the question. Now we have a choice. We can continue the patterns that brought us here, or we can try something new. I'm willing to have a relationship with you, but it will be on different terms. No more condescension. No more assumptions. No more trying to fit me into your narrow definition of success. You want an apology, my father stated. No, I said, surprising them. I want acknowledgement. I want you to understand that your way isn't the only way. That success doesn't require your approval. That building something meaningful can happen outside your prescribed paths. The conversation continued for hours. Questions about the company, about my life, about how I'd managed such complete deception. I answered selectively, protecting the parts of my journey that belonged only to me. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting golden light through the conference room windows, we reached a fragile understanding. The family dynamic had shifted irrevocably. I was no longer the failure to be pitted, but a force to be reckoned with. There's one more thing, I announced as we prepared to leave. I'm going public with my identity next week. The Wall Street Journal will run the exclusive. You should be prepared for media attention. You're revealing yourself as E. Rosechin? Margaret asked. It's time, I nodded. The secret has served its purpose. Now I want to inspire other failures to build their own definitions of success. A week later, the Wall Street Journal's headline read, "The Ghost Revealed. E. Rosechin emerges from the shadows." The article detailed my journey from family disappointment to healthcare revolutionary. It went viral within hours. The media storm was intense but manageable. What mattered more were the thousands of messages from young people who'd been dismissed by their families, told they weren't enough, weren't following the right path. They saw themselves in my story. My family adapted, slowly and imperfectly. My father started reading about AI and healthcare. My mother, for the first time, introduced me at parties with genuine pride. Jonathan asked thoughtful questions about technology. Margaret offered pro bono legal services to my charitable foundation. It wasn't perfect. Years of ingrained dynamics don't disappear overnight. But it was progress. MedFlow continued to grow. We went public 18 months later at a valuation of $2 billion. I rang the opening bell at the NYSE, my family watching from the floor. The girl they'd called a disappointment had built something that would outlast them all. But the real victory wasn't the money or the vindication. It was the 13-year-old girl in Ohio who emailed to say my story inspired her to pursue computer science despite her family's doubts. It was the medical student in Kenya using our technology to diagnose patients in rural clinics. It was proving that success isn't inherited or granted. It's built, one line of code at a time. My grandmother was right. Truth does honor those who speak it. But sometimes, the most powerful truths are the ones we live in silence until the world is ready to hear them. As I stood in my new office, looking out at the city where I'd hidden in plain sight for so long, I thought about the journey from that Thanksgiving dinner to this moment. Every sacrifice, every lonely night coding, every family gathering endured with grace had led here. Success, I'd learned, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, that proof comes with a signature on a document that changes everything. The empire built in shadows now stood in daylight. And it was beautiful. To everyone watching who's ever been told you're not enough, that your dreams are too big, that you should settle for less. Build anyway. Build in secret if you must. Build without permission. Build until they have no choice but to see your light. Your signature might be the one that changes everything too. Thank you for joining me on this journey. What's your story of overcoming doubt? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear that their dreams are valid. Until next time, keep building, keep believing, and remember, the best revenge is massive success paired with inner peace.